Chapter 12 Sugar Cubes. Yes, I'm back from vacation, folks. And yes, it was a blast. Yes, I got a lot of cool stuff, including a new air conditioner for the studio. Her name is Baskin. She's a vanillite that I caught. She's adorable. Chapter 12 Sugar Cubes. Suffice it to say, there was a wedding. Suffice it to say, there were months of planning. Then there were serious questions about appetizers and the colors of tablecloths. Suffice it to say, there was a dress, one made by the studious old dressmaker and her young unicorn apprentice, whose detailing was exacting and as precise as each of the 3 diamonds of her key mark implied. Oh my gosh! Twilight Unit cameo! Suffice it to say, there was a ceremony. Suffice it to say, there was a tearful reunion of Cupcake's sister with her father, the big stallion even wrapping her marathon in a mammoth hug. Suffice it to say, there was a ceremony, one of traditional equestrian taste. Suffice it to say that her nieces threw flower petals. Suffice it to say, there was disappointment that the old dance hall where they had first met had gone out of business and was not available for the reception. Suffice it to say that Ivory used her new contacts to make sure that Ponyfield City Hall was available, and that the colors and buntings of the circular building filled it with color and life. Suffice it to say that Ponyfield had long kept the secret of the game of this came out in droves when so invited to partake of the celebration. So much so that Corey had to offer up bounties for more food and drink. Carrot actually made a profit of his own wedding. Suffice it to say that the celebration went far into the night. Whereas the nights were becoming chilly as autumn began, it seemed that the entire body of Ponyfield crowded into the celebratory space for warmth and fellowship. Suffice it to say, the crowd made it rather difficult, and in fact impossible, for Carrot and Cupcake to make their departure and enjoy their first night together as a married couple. Suffice it to say, they were a tad miffed by that. Suffice it to say that the next morning they were ushered to the train station by their families. After tearful goodbyes and a round of hugs, the blurry couple were ushered aboard the southbound train. Suffice it to say that the train rocked them in their seats and the warm light fell in through the windows. She laid her head across his chest. As the fresh air met them, the two were soon asleep. Suffice it to say that the kindly old conductor laid a blanket across the two as they slumbered together in the seat, knowing it was probably best that he'd take the ticket later. Suffice it to say that when the crosshead on the cylinder shore off, sending a loud cascade of steam hissing out into the afternoon, it all started aboard the train. The newlyweds were no exception, and they rolled from their seat to the floor in alarm. Cupcake landed upon her husband, their nap firmly interrupted. Suffice it to say, the train slowly rolled to a stop, just short of a small station that sat deep within those swampy reaches of the warm, wet part of Equestria. Suffice it to say that the ponies of the tiny village that were very surprised to have a trainload of visitors. The hamlet opened itself up to the stranded travelers, and upon learning that Carrot and Cupcake were on their honeymoon, the entirety of the village came to life. Suffice it to say, there was a large celebration. Exotic dishes of peppers and rice and crawfish were laid out before the guests. Though they were far from home as they had ever been in their lives, the 2 ponies felt oddly at ease. Suffice it to say that as the spare engine arrived and brought the wounded train up to the station, there were tearful goodbyes and promises of gifts that would be exchanged. Suffice it to say that the promise was kept and would play out in ways not anticipated by any that waved goodbye on the platform of the station that late afternoon. Suffice it to say that when the train finally arrived in Port-au-Prince, the passengers were still very much full of the good food and very much tired from the impromptu festivities. Suffice it to say that as the late night closed in around them, the tired forms of Carrot Cake and Cupcake were slowly drawn through the warm, humid streets of the port city. Her head was in his lap as the carriage drew them along the cobblestone streets, as jazz music flowed from the bars and cabarets. Suffice it to say that the steward of the hotel had to gently wake them and tell them that the railroad company had sent word that they were already registered. Suffice it to say that upon being led to the honeymoon bungalow, the two could only gaze at its splendor. They could hear the wind brushing through the palms around it, could hear the ocean and see starlight reflected off of it. Why was starlight there, we have no idea. Sorry, folks, but these are the only jokes you're getting. Suffice it to say that as these smells reached them, they lay together in bed upon the screened-in ports and were soon asleep, each wrapped deep within the forelegs of each other, and were so denied for a second night the usual comforts that a honeymoon provides. Suffice it to say that Carrot Cake awoke late the following morning, the inevitable position of having a rather famous-looking cupcake staring down over him. And it was not for any meal that she was starved, for something more delightful, enticing, and satisfying. And as we say here in these parts, whips, chains, and kinky leather, Carrot Cake is going to get laid this night. And with that, he raised his lips to hers, and with small kisses he began to draw them across her neck, her chest, her barrel. So it was that they spent the first day amid the balmy sea breezes, partaking of such delights that's what satiated their appetite for the taste of another's affections, filled and longing whose satisfaction had been denied them for 2 long nights. The steward had seen this before, even though they had placed the breakfast order, the food had gone largely uneaten. One day of it had been understandable, but a second only left him fearing for the health of the clientele. Besides, Poto Provence had so much to offer a young couple, besides the view from the soft beds of the bungalow. They had to simply eat something. One cannot live on love alone. Clearing his throat, the steward disregarded the do not disturb sign and knocked on the door. As he waited, he looked down to the plates and saw the waffle had been nibbled upon in such a manner that it now resembled a heart. He could not help but notice the tooth marks on it were from 2 different ponies, one smaller and one larger. He could only imagine that when the two had met at the apex of the heart, that set off another situation that led the breakfast to expire. He waited as long as he thought polite, and lifted his hoof to knock once more. Almost as he had done so, the door came open, just enough to reveal the form of a rather haggard, yet visibly exalted young stallion with an amber coat. "Hi!" Carrot breathed in a foreign tone.
Good afternoon, sir," said the steward. "I'm very sorry to interrupt, but seeing as your breakfast went uneaten..."
"Oh, yeah, we were occupied," said Blessed Carrot Cake.
"Understandable, sir. Seeing as much on behalf of the hotel, we would like to offer these meal vouchers for dinner at any number of our local eateries,"
spoke the steward as he produced a handful of coupons from his uniform. "Oh, wow, thank you," said Carrot as he took them up. "I really appreciate that." The steward smiled. "Just now, what would you think of eating in the city tonight?" said Carrot.
"Oh, that would be lovely," came the joyful, guilty voice of the mayor. "Now, come back to bed."
The steward saw Carrot blush some more, and looked at him with a ridiculous grin.
"I would like to remind, sir, that your breakfast is all included in the honeymoon package, and that you have not yet requested any today,"
said the dying steward. Oh, we haven't. I see, please," said Carrot as he turned back to the bungalow. "Sugar Plum, would you like anything to drink?" And to mention the second name, the steward wondered how many mares the stallion was entertaining. When the same happy voice answered, he realized it was simply another pet name for the same mare, who sang out happily the first time.
"Oh, raspberry iced tea,"
she sang in a lifting tone.
"Now, come back to bed." "Would perhaps some iced water too, sir? I still bring pitchers of 8. We wouldn't want you both to get dehydrated, that's all,"
said the steward with a smile. As Carrot blessed some more, the steward went off to the midday sun, palms rustling around him. As he went back down the path, he could not help but smile to himself. They seemed quite happy, that young couple. Why shouldn't they be? They fit together so well, after all. The pincers were discovered soon after. Carrot prepared a tray with 2 tall glasses of the drinks, let a small mountain of sugar cubes gather in a bowl so they could sweeten their drinks to taste. He lifted the tray and brought it back out into the hidden ports high above the waters, away from any prying eyes. Cupcake swung in a hammock, letting the warm ocean breeze settle over her. Carrot's eyes fell across her once more as he caught the wild frazzle of her mane. He prepared her drink first. "How many sugar cubes would you like, honey bun?"
"2, please,"
she answered as he turned in her hammock. She regarded him sweetly as he poured the teas and dropped the sugar and ice cubes within the careful hooves. As he did, she hovered upside down upon the hammock above the tray and drinks. He lifted the glass, and to her surprise he touched it to her chest, her stomach and neck. The cold raced through her as the ice within the glass chimed out, making her squirm and gave tiny happy squeals each time the glass brushed her coat. Her small sounds rose higher as thin wet films fell across her, as the condensation found its way through the blue hues of her coat and met her fair skin beneath. He pleasantly tormented her, so until the ice clattered in a bucket, announcing the time had passed. With that, he looked for a place to put where he could reach from upon the hammock. As he did, her hoof lifted and brushed against his chest. He looked to see her gesturing to the already familiar daybed across the way. Understanding what she was implying, he took the glass, and across the way laid them carefully upon the table which stood nearby, lumping upon the bed. He looked up to realize he had forgotten to flavor his own tea. Garrett put his hood to his face as he realized his mistake. He looked up to see her still upside down upon the hammock. Her hose lay to rest upon her, folded down the length of her chest. The twin tones of her raging mane fell from her, hung loose, and farther down her rear legs sat crossed at the ankles, laying upon the post and gently moving in slow motion to make the hammock sway just so. She looked down with a look of supplying anticipation, an unending stream of expectancy as she moved her hips back and forth in regular motions, making her body lift and sway even as she lay supine upon the hammock. Ginger snap? He asked as he laid upon the table to ponder his love for her repose. When you got up, could you bring me a sugar cube or two, please? Cupcake sat up and looked down over his shoulder, a devious smile across her face. With that, she looked from the hammock to gather the entirety of the sugar cube bowl that led by a thin wire handle and carried it across the way. Carrot watched as she brushed back her mane and then, as though in slow motion, she lowered her head and picked up one of the cubes with her teeth. She turned to look down, the sugar cube resting upon her lips, set just upon her teeth. She moved, but not towards the tall glass of iced tea. Cupcake laid her hose across his chest and hovered over him, looking down at him with rosy eyes that he adored. She lowered her head and made him make small movements to claim the cube, pulling back in a slice each time he reached up. Carrot smiled to her, saw the perfect angles of the sugar cube playing out against the ideal blue of her coat and white of her teeth. She lowered herself again, this time without teasing him. His lips met hers, moved against hers, sharing the sugar cube back and forth between them. Each chased across the tongue of the other until the cube melted its way across their lips. One cube, she asked with a giggle, making her hose small circle across his chest. Or two? Two, he answered. Oh yes, definitely two. He also lit another one, drank in the image of the sugar cube in its corners, juxtaposed against the soft curves of her face. One little corner of the sugar cube sat out, calling his lips up to hers once more. Sugar cube, corner. The three words floated through him as they shared the second cube, the taste of the sugar cube linking them in one sensation of taste. I think I just thought of a new name for a bakery, he said as he lowered his head back to the pillow. Then he climbed back upon the bed and laid it across his chest. I got it! Golden Oaks Library! Oh, for crying out loud, read the room! Well, I can't believe we got a chance to do the Weird Al joke reference. Trixie knows we are back! That's so wonderful, Carrot, she said as her eyes closed and he stroked her mane. The sounds of the ocean rolled up the beats as Cupcake completed her thought. Everything's just so wonderful. They enjoyed their dinner in the city. The restaurant was pleasant and looking in right in the main square. They were seated in a garden and listened to the jazz music that floated over the city as they ate. They walked back past the old fortress. The gates were illuminated by lanterns that flashed through an explosion of colors. They walked the beats as the sun set. As they watched Celestia lower her charts across the horizon, the night fell. They scampered across among the tide, chased the birds and each other. She looked back to see that he stopped his chase and was staring down something that stood upon the sand. He raised his head and asked her to return. As he did, she found that his hoofprint was set among hers, that encompassed it. Together the two prints seemed almost as one. He looked up to her. She smiled as he encircled the two prints with a perfect heart. Together they walked down to the waters of the ocean that came rolling in, let it wash over their ankles and legs as the last rays of sunset fell in the west. And he stared out the broad horizon. With that, They went back up to the sheltered bungalow, hidden as it was among the palms, away from the inquisitive eyes and delicate ears of those who might be enjoying a stroll among the moonlit beach. Good thing that, as the night was still young, and they were very much in love. There is no greater argument for the existence of superpowers than the power of perception granted to mothers. The tiniest whisper when a child is supposed to be asleep, the faintest cry of pain from an upset stomach, these are all within the range of the ears of a caring mother. The ability to sense that something is not right, that their child is somehow in danger of harm or hurting themselves, the ability to somehow just know, these are the gifts given to a mother. The gift lurched Roxy awake on a brilliant moonlit night in the fading days of autumn. Once she sensed it, she slowly left Clyde in the warm bed, as a feeling that set deep upon her maternal instincts, something she could not name. Something was wrong with one of her babies, but she did not know what. She went down the hallway to separate the two bedrooms and silent homes, avoiding the familiar weak places that would sound out the wooden groans it disturbed. The door of the room was already open and cracked. Roxy stared within as a nameless apprehension filled her. Her eyes swept the room, saw the figures of Inky, Blinky, Maud, still asleep on their beds. She found no such comfort upon looking upon Pinky's bed. It was empty. The sheets were thrown wide, and no sign of the pink filly anywhere in the room met her searching eyes. She quickly wheeled around to the upstairs bathroom, saw the door wide and the room unoccupied. Inside a few steps, Roxy was heading down the stairs upon quick hooves. The mother moved room from room, searching out her missing daughter. As she did, she called her name. "Blanky," she whispered, her eyes growing more and more accustomed to the darkness as she searched out small places, darting back and forth through rooms as she already said, "Blankamina, now isn't the time for games," she said, even while being sped across the rooms, lifting her voice as high as she dared. "Blankamina, Pinkie Pie, Blinky." 100 horrors grew inside her as he sped back up the stairs, went across the 3 rooms that stood there in the darkness once more, then sped back down the stairs with noises of constrained worry. She was not here. She was not in the house. Pinky was not in the small, quiet house at all. Worries that only a parent could feel began to rise up in Roxy. Horrible thoughts began to rise as the clock in the hallway began to chime the early morning hour. She checked each of the downstairs rooms again, looking under the couch, even opening the icebox door and peering within as more and more dread grew behind her eyes. "Pinky," she called once more, louder than before. Movement. A small little motion crossed her eyes and played down across the edges of her vision. Roxy turned and looked out the window. She stared across the fields of the farm Clyde had built, not believing what she saw there. Immediately, she had grabbed a house coat and stood upon the old rack, opened the door, and stepped down a few steps into the frigid first hours of the late autumn morning, where the moon still hung high in the sky. A voice reached her. Once her hoof went to her mouth in surprise and alarm. As she watched, a small horror began to spread over her. Inside of a moment, she had pelted back within the house. She barely cleared the door when she was aware of movement inside her home. The feel of one of her loved ones awake and moving. Clyde stood at the top of the stairs and peered down to her. He too had come awake and sensed something wrong. He had heard the fearful sound of her racing about and calling for one of her daughters. Clyde too had seen the empty bed. He had the fear of a parent awakening him as he stared down to her, felt the cold autumn frost sneaking in through the door as he looked up to him, with anxiety planted across her face. "Clyde!" she called in a whisper of implore, alarm in her voice, raising her hoof to him. Once the stallion was crashing down the stairs, joining her as he made for the door. And once the two were outside, he blinked to try to force his eyes to adjust to the moonlight. Across the wood strip acres of the farm, some movement caught his eye. Sheldon looked across the tall spire of a silo as a small flicker of flame rose against the black of the night. He looked on as the figure swayed back and forth, and left the kitchen scene more like a pagan ritual than a party. A party. That was what was happening on his farm. That is what his daughter was doing out of her warm bed, here in the first hours of a frosty autumn day that still lingered in the blackness of night. Peggy's voice came crackling and uncertain. It was still her daughter. but it was though she was thin and drawn. As they approached her, they saw her dancing, at least attempting to dance. Her voice rang out as she sang, at least attempted to sing.
Pigmina?
Came her mother's voice, and at once the little filly turned to face them. Her colors went into stark relief as she turned into the darkness. A shell fell from the silo as a small birthday cake, one that seemed to be hastily thrown together, sat before them, light with a dozen candles.
Hi, Papa!
She says she trembled and called,
Did you come to celebrate the Silo's birthday too? We never threw a Silo a birthday yet. I woke up and said, we never threw a Silo a birthday party. If today could be that day. I mean, any day could be the day, but I don't know when. So it's today because...
Okay. Her father interrupted a little effect.
I was looking at the Silo. That's how I could figure out where we built the Silo. That could be his birthday.
She continued, unaware of the growing voice of worry.
Pinkie Pie.
Her father scolded, her voice full of worthy.
I guess we should have one for the barn to build the house too, because we don't want them to think we don't want them to make it tell us that there's something worse than tell us been willing.
Pinkamena! Roared her father, his voice echoing out the silo, drowning down over the steep acres of his farm. Pinky went stark still, her expression drooping. For one of the very few instants in her life, she looked upon him as he glared at her in anger. His face creased and his ears back beneath the black hat.
I just wanted to...
She said as she trembled, and the candles upon the cake tossing in the cold autumn wind that drove them. Slowly, her two parents came up to her, stood around her, and blocked the wind from raising her. Pinkie Pie, he said as he lowered his head to her. The expression stern and set with concern. Your mother was terrified. She woke up and you weren't in your bed. She ran through the house calling for you. What have you gotten, lost or hurt?
Pinkie Pie rolled around, looked at her mom. I'm sorry, Mama.
Pinkie, said her mother, you know better. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, dear. It's so very cold. You're trembling.
I am?
Asked Pinkie, simply unaware. Philly looked down across her own legs, saw them shake in the moonlight.
I am trembling. I'm cold. I'm cold,
she said, darting about the place. She quickly blew out the candles upon the cake and wrapped herself around the leg of her father. With that, they went back to the house in the darkness. Together, the 3 climbed the stairs, the shaking form of Pinkie still huddled to them. To their surprise, Maud stood at the top of the stairs, the filly hiding behind the doorframe to her room. Mama, Papa, what's going on? Asked the drowsy filly, looking upon her parents and sister fretfully. Nothing, dear, said her mother while planting a kiss upon her head, as Clyde guided Pinkie towards their room. Go back to bed, my love. Pinkie lay between them, to hear their bodies warming their filly as she fell back to sleep. Roxy cuddled close to her filly and husband. She soon returned to sleep. Her maternal superpowers having been satiated. For Clyde, though, sleep did not come for a great long while. Now his parental instincts were at fore, and it was no longer soon coming. Something was wrong. Something her Mark wanted. Something that had drifted from her bed into the frigid night. Something he did not know how to provide. Clyde closed his eyes and wondered if there was not anything he could do. He stood up, looking across his loved ones until sleep found him, and lowered his head back to the pillow. Outside, the moonlight shone. No voices carried on the wind that drove the dying autumn leaves across the farm. The bowl of thin wafer candy stood upon the table. It was something of a distance between them. She selected one and looked into her teeth, so that it rested lightly across her lips. As the warm, sweet smells of the bakery of Sugar Cube Corner lifted around them, carrot cake and cupcake reenacted the moment of inspiration that given the bakery its name. Carrot saw the thin round disc sitting upon her tongue, between her lips. In a long motion he leaned in, held his lips to hers, let the disc melt away as they passed it forth between them. Together they shared the taste of the candy, just as they had shared a sugar cube that long, long ago, dissolved, but whose taste had lingered for those years and decades. Years that were sometimes happy, sometimes sad, sometimes trying. This was just one of the many happy little traditions that accompanied the construction of the annual gingerbread house. She watched as it came closer and closer to being complete. It truly now looked like the great work that was so often purchased months in advance, or some years, was even bid for charity. This year it had a special purpose. This year it was special. This heartwarming, the gingerbread house was meant to symbolize that much more. So he turned back to the oven and removed a dozen figures, the Salway decoration, the residents of the gingerbread house. She looked back to Carrie and giggled as she saw the great white dome of frosting still sung across his nose. This year was turning out special indeed. It was to Cupcake's great joy that her nieces and nephews had called on him, Uncle Carrot, so quickly. They had moved without question from looking to him as Aunt Cupcake's friend to Aunt Cupcake's cold friend, to family. Their extensive care was as complete and total as they had been part of their lives for 1,000 years. Their reception of the gangly stallion as total and whole as only a child can offer. Cupcake helped her oldest niece wash her hose free in the know, as Carrot held the colt place trays of cookies within the great warm oven, the colt being amazed by the rows of blue flame that sat within. Carrot walked gingerly to avoid the little form of his youngest niece, the one who walked beneath and beside him as though he were a puppy rather than a miniature full-grown filly with 6 long years. As he smiled at the sight, Cupcake looked out the window. So the cold, deep part of the winter had once more arrived. Here inside the warm bakery, she thought about how almost a year before she had almost run from this bakery in fear. Of how she almost let herself become consumed by dread and apprehension. Her fear was gone. Now the weak-jawed stallion sat in the showcase room with his hose over his eyes, counting as her nephew and nieces tried to hung among the counters, stands, and racks in a game of hide-and-seek. She wondered what would have happened if Carrot had not tripped down the stairs. If her first instinct had not been to reach for him to see his hurts. Would the scenes like this have happened? Would he still be dwelling in that dark netherworld of not knowing? He had not taken a risk, trusted to his love. She took the cookies out of the oven as peals of laughter erupted from the showcase room. Looking within, she saw the gentle host of her husband, employed defending himself from attackers, seeming intent on tickling him. He answering their attacks in kind as they fell over him, slid down his flanks, and rested against him before renewing their assaults. Cupcake giggled to herself as the winter outside grew deeper, darker. Yet the warmth that flowed from the laughter in the next room drove the thoughts cold far from her. After the children had decorated their cookies, they all washed their dishes. Cupcake, though, finished them, drying them as the four once more returned to the showcase room. Cupcake found herself staring out over the cooling rack as dozens of foals smiled back at her, each wildly colored and overly decorated. The cookies were each a picture of happy children. One seemed so very much alive, joyful as Carrot was making her sister's foals. Inside Cupcake something moved. A feeling grew. And with a breath she pondered it, let it swirl around the winter wind which rattled the window pane. She saw the flash of a vision, saw herself standing over a cradle, singing a lullaby as her husband stood nearby. She went to the doorway. Leaning against it, she pondered the scene before her. Carrot was doing a dramatic reading of a cookbook. Her youngest niece sat beneath him, touching his lap with her head resting upon his forelegs as he sat, her eldest niece and nephew leaning against his flanks as he read. Carrot lifted his distinctive voice, giving characters like Nutmeg and Baker's Chocolate elaborate backstories. Had them do battle with mixing spoons and escape the clutches of eagle-eyed bears. She smiled as he sent his ingredients off on adventures across scorching ovens and through the wilds of kitchens. Carrot had them find the lost treasures of jelly fillings and frostings, the foals hanging on his every word. Her mind went to a wide number of places, saw boxes of unused diapers, clouds of baby powder. The bakery was doing fine. They were not going to get rich, but they were not going to starve by any means. They were happy. They loved one another. There was no reason why they couldn't. Please, she whispered to the magic of Equestria. I'm ready for this. I want this. Her eyes settled back upon Carrot. A smile settled over as he completed his narrative. All too soon, Ruby Quartz had arrived. The foals gathered their cookies into paper bags and had said their goodbyes. Amid the kisses and hugs, the youngest niece had been reluctant to leave, wrapping herself tightly to her aunt and uncle. Only their promises of visits whenever he wished were making her family relinquish her hold. With that, the bakery went all too quiet again. Far too quiet for Cupcake's liking, for her wish. Karen stood in the kitchen, wiping down his equipment, whistling as he did so. Get it? He heard her say, her soft voice full of questions. Had he not heard this tone from her before? It caused attention and drew him to his wife. Ginger snap? He asked. What's up? Something wrong? No, nothing's wrong. As he said, sitting there before him, waiting as he too put aside his task and sat with her upon the warm kitchen floor. She began after taking a breath, looking up to his green eyes. I think we should start thinking about having a foal. Okay, he said. Her words barely left her. She startled and looked back to him with puzzlement. Really? She asked. I mean, we should really start thinking about what it... Kara stuck his tongue inside of his head. He took off his cap and ran himself under his chin and gave it a little hum. I just think, he said, looking back at her and grinned. Let's have a fall. Can it? She said as she stood, looking back at him as though she did not believe he was treating it as the weighty matter it was. I'm serious, please, He lifted his mouth to hers and drew her into another kiss, one that called her back down so she sat with him again, moved her closer to him. He looked at her with a smile upon his face. At the same time, earnestness sat behind his eyes. Cupcake? He said as he was laying his chest, the place where her world felt like she was safe and most secure. I am serious. I was going to think about what you think about getting started at trying to... Really? She asked. Her smile so evident he could feel it upon her as he sat pressed against him. Yes, he said as he lowered himself to plant a kiss upon her head. Haven't you asked the magic yet? Yes, she answered. Just as you were playing with... Please. She heard him say with his voice just about to whisper. Firm and resolute. I want this. I am ready for this. As soon as he had finished, she repeated her earlier implore, nestling beneath his chin and against his chest as he spoke the words. It's entirely symbolic, at least the words, but what it meant spoke volumes. This was their wish, that this would happen. They could have this for one another. So began the second round of the game of this. With that, more strings of causality looped around them, and some moving in ways they had not perhaps expected. She lifted herself and stared up to him. She took deep breaths, heart skipping as he lowered his nose to hers. As the two rubbed them in slow, long circles and figure eights, the sensation of their touch fell through one another, filling the other with well-being, love, hope. Then we should get started, she said with a giggle going through her. Kira's eyes shifted back and forth, pondering his kiss with a wicked smile. You mean, right here? He said as he looked back to her with a wink. Cupcake put her hoof on his chest, rolled her eyes, and then stood, I'll get it, she said while she turned towards the showcase room, looking back to him at his shoulder. You're insatiable. He met her rosy eyes and gave a great smile, only because you shall be a full sugar plum. He followed her as he began to walk, watched her steps come bouncing out at once that revealed her own anticipation. How about here? He asked as he pointed at the long display case. He listened to her giggle, felt himself hooked in the music of it. How about here? He inquired, pointing to the seldom used closet by the door, her laughter growing with each succession. Here, here, here. He poured as their hose made soft sounds across each of the steps that led to the second floor, bedroom beyond. He let her stop as he reached the top of the stairs. She felt his hoof trace the length of her stifle and gaskin. She looked back at him and saw him draw himself up, iced her to return to his embrace. As he did, she felt him lift her, carrying her in an unpony-like fashion. He used his body to open the door, let his frame fall back and close it gently. With that, he laid his wife, his love, upon the bed and looked down over her body. Wherever you want to go. He repeated as the memory reached him. I'll go there with you. As the winter wind swirled around the bakery, the place where they both wished to go was towards making their love manifest. To bring into this happy world of magic and sunlit days a little pony he could cherish. She called his body over hers, got his face down to hers, and with that, they went down as one down that path. You know, thinking about my schedule over the years, it's been interesting. It seems like with my job incoming and all that, that it's made my schedule erratic. It's made me think about some changes of what time I need to post, what times I need to record. It used to be I used to record early in the mornings. Now it's just whenever I get a chance to. I guess that's just the way life is. But I think what's also really been changing my schedule a little bit is the moving to this new place. Like getting all this vacation time. I don't know what it is about the new studio and new location, but it just seems more free, giving me a chance to do more. As such, makes me want to change and have to figure out how I'm going to do this more. I still love doing this, and I still want to do this. But it's all about organization and figure things out. I guess in that way, I'm not like Kara, trying to figure out new ways and new abilities to handle things that I've done for so long.